Every one of us has been subjected to biases, and every one of us has subjected other people to biases, whether we're aware of it or not. I decided to do research on the part of biases we are unaware of, called unconscious biases, in order to better inform you on what these are and why we need to be aware of unconscious biases in order to prevent it. Today, I will share the issues that come with unconscious biases as well as some solutions. So, what are unconscious biases? Juanice Taylor, the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the University of Mississippi Medical Center, says that biases rest in the subconscious, and they are mental associations so well established that they operate without awareness, attention, or control. Dr. Taylor also identifies that unconscious biases come from the influences of life experiences, including socialization, beliefs, personal attitudes, environment, media, and the news. There are many forms of biases against people, like by their race, ethnicity, gender, sexuality, religion, language, and so on. In healthcare, the literature related to gender bias primarily refers to instances in which female patients are assessed, diagnosed, and treated not only differently, but at a lower level of quality and care than men with comparable health problems. For example, the Cardiovascular Research Foundation reported that women presenting with cardiac heart disease symptoms are significantly less than men to receive diagnosis, referral, and treatment due to the misdiagnosis of stress and anxiety. Dr. Taylor also mentions weight bias, saying there is substantial empirical evidence that people with obesity elicit negative feelings. They are frequently the targets of prejudice, derogatory comments, and just other poor treatment in a variety of settings, including healthcare. One of the most controversial topics involving unconscious biases is police racial bias. Researcher Lewis James at Washington State provides research on police officers showing that they tend to associate darker skin tones with threat. Project Implicit consists of assessments widely used to understand unconscious biases, and James's study tested 80 police officers using the category of the Weapons Implicit Association Test, or IAT for short. His research results concluded that IAT scores vary between test sessions, indicating that racial bias is a variable state. The study also found that the less sleep an officer got the night before, the more likely they were to associate African Americans with threat, proving just how much the unconscious mind influences bias. So now that you know what unconscious biases are and some of the problems they bring, I will suggest some preventative measures. Exposure impacts the way an individual unconsciously perceives a certain demographic. A 2005 study done by Plant and Peru showed that responses to a computer simulation revealed that upon initial exposure to the program, police officers were more likely to shoot an unarmed black suspect compared with an unarmed white suspect. However, after extensive training with the program, where race was unrelated to the presence of weapons, the officers were able to eliminate bias. A program called the CBMI paradigm from psychologists Matthew and McIntosh achieved manipulation in interpretation biases found in people whose negative biases affected their mental status, like in depressed individuals. Also, the IAT has many different categories and can be used for preventative corrective action before giving people like public servants their responsibilities to the public. So now that you know some of the preventive measures that can be taken, let's go deeper into how to use them to solve the issue of unconscious biases. Public servants, bureaucracies, companies, organizations, businesses, schools, the ones who have to interact with the public, should understand the importance of biases and how detrimental it is to themselves, their employees, and the public to be aware of their own hidden mental associations. Companies should require their employees who serve the public to undergo testing like the implicit association test to measure their biases towards the demographic that they will be serving. The CBMI paradigm that was effective in altering particular interpretation biases in people with depression can be used similarly to teach people with negative unconscious biases the ethical responses and attitudes. When unconscious biases are identified, another tactic is exposure to the demographic that they hold the biases against. Whether that be in person or through an online program, exposure can be the quickest way to get an individual to understand and eradicate their biases. So ultimately, companies need to employ a system of education, identification, and eradication of unconscious biases. I wonder what the United States would look like if we weren't influenced to determine a presidential candidate's credibility based on age, race, or gender. I wonder what the media and what mental health would look like if we weren't to associate someone's body size with their quality of life. I wonder what the streets would look like if people didn't assume that the homeless person asking for food money had a drug addiction. I wonder what it would feel like to not be unreasonably afraid of the grown man I'm in the elevator alone with. Just imagine what the world would look like if life hadn't formed our unconscious biases that society and other influences have taught us over the years. Even if we don't fully understand it, we all know how tense the climate we live in is. I hear people saying that they wish everyone would just stop being so sensitive. But the issue is that we are not addressing why people are getting so offended, because a lot of us simply aren't aware. The longer we treat these biases as jokes to sweep under the rug because it's easier that way, the more it will pile up until it's impossible to control.